Yo guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Babblemouth podcast. Today, I am by myself, and I'm going to be reading you 3 creepypasta stories that I find you guys are going to love. These are, I just went to the top ranked episodes, and I picked out 3. I did have 3 specifically, and then I changed one of them while I was actually recording the episode, because I didn't want to have too many really, really long ones, because 2 of them were over like 14 minutes, and I just can't be bothered to read that much in one. So so the first story is about 13-14 minutes long, and then we got about a 6-7 minute, and then about a 5 minute. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. And yeah, so the stories we're going to be today are He Comes, Ickbarr Bigelsteine, and Hoodie, or The Hooded Man, whichever you want to call it. It has 2 titles. And the first story is also called He Comes, Zalago, or whatever. But yeah, hopefully you guys do enjoy these stories. Remember to rate the podcast 5 stars. I always forget to say that in the beginning of these. But yeah, make sure you guys leave a fucking review on Apple, or just rate it. You don't have to leave a review, just rate it on Apple, but mostly rate it 5 stars on Spotify. And make sure you guys follow the podcast on Spotify as well. We upload a new episode every week, or we post a new episode every week, so make sure you guys post, I know, yeah, just fucking rate it 5 stars. But yeah, let's get right into these stories, guys. Alright, guys, the first story is titled He Comes by Chris Phoenix. Forgive the length of this message. This is the first and possibly the last time I'll have access to a computer, so I thought I'd better write this all down while I can and get it to those who should know. I'm leaving town. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just getting as far away as I can. Okay, so as some of you may know, I took out a loan and opened my own auto shop a little over a year ago. Business has been going decently well. I can't complain, and I've always been grateful to all my customers who would come to me exclusively when God knows there are so many already established places in town. And he's been working hard and helping out really well, as I always knew he would. Well, I needed to take a day and go to a Lamaze class with Rebecca last month, and so I entrusted the shop to Neil for the morning and most of the afternoon. That's the day I think everything actually started, because when I got back, he seemed to be in a stupor and was covered in oil. He'd even had some smeared across his face, as if he tried to drink it or something. I told him to go home and clean himself up because no clients at the moment, and I could take care of anyone who came through for the time being. He came back 45 minutes later, but he was still much quieter than usual. He worked as well as he ever did, but something just seemed off about him. I asked him if anything happened while I was out, and he just shook his head. I asked how many clients we had, and he just muttered something unintelligible. I asked him to repeat himself, and he turned and glared at me, and for the briefest moment I could have swore his eyes appeared to be completely black. No iris, no sclera, just utter, consuming blackness. I stumbled back and bumped a shelf, knocking things down. When I looked back at him, he was still looking at me, but he didn't seem to be glaring hatefully the way he had before. He just seemed kind of out of it. Just a couple, he answered. Some women, and then a tattooed biker type looking dude. I assumed one of them must have asked for an oil change, and that's why he spilled it. So I asked him if he had any trouble, and he simply shrugged. I had looked around the garage while he was gone, and I saw no trace of an oil spill. So whatever had happened, he must have gotten it all on himself, and none of it anywhere else. Miraculously. But he seemed reluctant to talk about it, so I didn't press the issue, and we worked on throughout the day. That day and the next were relatively normal, other than him still being awkward and quiet. I asked him if he'd like to go out and get us lunch while I tend to the shop, and he said, sure. When he came back, I was busy doing a diagnostic for a client, so he put the food on the counter in the office to wait for me, and he went ahead and ate. I finished up with a customer. We'd stuff to keep her car overnight to figure out just why it kept dying on her, so I asked Neil to give her a ride home, and then I went to grab my food. He'd brought me some Chinese food and an iced tea, so I opened the soy sauce packets and poured some over my food when I noticed the strangest thing. It was as if the soy sauce was a living thing somehow, spreading out like dozens of squirming, inky black maggots. When it fell into the fried rice and burying itself inside, I took the fork and started to scoop out the rice that looked deeper inside, and small, smoky tendrils would rise from the rice, occasionally, and dissipate. I was incredibly hungry at this point, but I was way too creeped out to eat that. so I chucked it and the iced tea in the garbage. I decided I'd just wait till I got home that evening to eat something I'd prepare with my own hands. I'd never in my life seen anything remotely like that, and I couldn't even fathom how I would ask Neil if he'd noticed anything similar. As cold and distant as he'd been lately, I was sure he'd look at me like I was Looney Tunes, so I just shut up about it. That Friday, we went to the old watering hole as we always do to get some drinks and watch the local bands play. And Neil was just as quiet and distant as he had been all week. He's not a bad-looking fellow, though, and so despite him not really going all out the way he usually does, a woman went over to where he was sitting and started talking to him, and they ended up leaving together that night. Monday morning, I tried breaking the ice by asking him how his weekend went. He gave me a nod and muttered, "All right." I asked him if he got lucky with that young lady I saw him with, and he gave me the smallest grin, which was quite possibly the first grin I'd seen on his face in a week, and said it went well. I didn't pressure for details. I knew what he'd share if he chose to, and his small grin had enough to assume my worries and lend me some hope that he might get back to his old self soon. The day was relatively busy until about 3 p.m., so I finally had a spare moment to sit in the office and listen to the radio while I waited on the next client. So there I was, leaning back in my chair with my feet propped up on the desk when I swiveled around and looked at my bulletin board that sits behind my head with all manner of clippings stuck to it. I had a few Sunday comic strips such as Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes that I'd read maybe 100 times since I'd opened my shop there. But that day, something was different. The first panel seemed normal, but in each subsequent panel, inky black tendrils crept out of the edges of the frames and from behind the characters. Blood dripped from the ears and eyes, and sometimes even their noses, and in each of the strips, one of the characters would say, "He comes." I sat staring in astonishment for a moment before I realized the tendrils were moving ever so slowly, and then each of the characters' heads turned ever so slowly towards me, and I threw myself back away from the bulletin board. Sliding over my desk and onto the floor, I ran into the garage and yelled for Neil. I could not be the only one who could see this. To my surprise, he had gone, and so hesitantly walked back to the office and peered inside. The comics were still corrupted, but they no longer appeared to be moving. I crept over to it and reached to pluck one of the comics free when I noticed the inky black tendril started to seep across the page towards where my fingers were at least 3 times as fast as I'd moved before I jerked my hand away. Nothing good could possibly come from letting that blot of ink touch my skin. Of course, I ripped the entire bulletin board down, burned it in a tin trash can out back, and never spoke of it again. That night I went home and my wife was already in bed, fast asleep. My mind was racing and I couldn't even bring myself to eat dinner that night. With no one to vent my worries to, I fell into a restless sleep and kept waking to nightmare after nightmare seemingly every hour of the night until I just gave up on the sleep entirely. That Friday, I went to the bar again, even though my wife couldn't drink being pregnant at all, and Neil wasn't really any fun to hang out with anymore, and none of my other friends seemed to be reached. I just needed to get a good buzz and start feeling better, I reckoned. After downing a couple beers, I excused myself to the restroom when I noticed I was more inebriated than I'd estimated. So I leaned over the sink to splash some water into my face, and that's when I heard it, like a sheet of fabric being dragged across the floor. A voice rasped ever so quietly out of the drain. It sounded like a prolonged exhale for the longest time, until I finally recognized the words hidden amongst all those vowels. He comes. Cracks appeared on the porcelain, snaking out of the ring around the drain. At least they looked like cracks at first, but after a few seconds I recognized them as the tendrils of corruption I'd seen in the comics earlier that week, snaking their way slowly along. I stumbled backwards out of the bathroom door and right into someone's chest. I turned around and stared up into the pitch-black eyes of a 6.5-foot biker with tattoos covering every piece of exposed skin besides his hands and head. I stumbled quickly away from him and his evil piercing gaze followed me as I retreated through the bar. I felt like a dream, where, whenever you're running for your life, it feels like running through quicksand. As I walked across the room, I noticed that biker wasn't the only one staring at me. It seemed like every pair of eyes in the place were focused on me, and more than half of those eyes appeared to be perfectly black, with no hint of iris or sclera. A few lips moved, and throughout I could hear the voices over the sound of the jukebox. I could easily guess what they were saying. He comes. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I haven't been getting much sleep for the past couple of weeks, as a matter of fact, which I'm guessing those of you who've spoken to me recently would have guessed. I keep getting those pitch black eyes staring at me. I'm afraid of everyone I see will turn and whisper those words to me, staring deep into my soul, with that evil glare. Every time I go near a sink or to grab a bite to eat, I'm afraid I'll see those inky, snaking tendrils squiggling towards me. Even my wife has seemed cold and distant lately. Then tonight, as I'm driving home from work, struggling to keep my eyes open so that I don't drift into oncoming traffic, my cell phone rang, and it was Rebecca. She was on her way to the hospital to have our baby, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I was actually happy. She was in labor room strapped to a monitor when I got there, watching for her contractions. She barely noticed when I walked in, but didn't seem startled when I sat down beside her and took her hand in mine. I tried talking to her, but she was unresponsive, and I was so tired I didn't even realize I had started to drift off to sleep until the nurses came in and started moving her to the delivery room about half an hour later. I put on my scrubs and a hairnet and went in with her to hold her hand and coach her through like she trained us in Lamaze when she started cursing and screaming. I was prepared for that, as well as her ever-tightening grip on my hand, but when I saw the movement in her tummy, mine started to reel. The doctor said that the baby was crowning and told her to push. I echoed his orders, and she screamed at me with a voice I couldn't begin to describe. When I looked down at her, she was staring up at me with those same eyes I'd seen on the biker. The same eyes I thought I'd seen on Neil weeks before. I tried to jerk my hand away, but she maintained her grip. Black tar-like blood splashed the front of the doctor's scrubs, but he seemed to pay no heed. When I looked at her tummy again, black veins seemed to stand out beneath her skin, pulsating. She continued to stare at me, and she was no longer screaming, just grinning, those obsidian eyes boring into me. To invoke the Nespirian hive mind of chaos, she breathed in a raspy voice. "He who waits behind the wall," the doctor continued as he stared down at the child. My child, lying silently, cradled in his blood-stained hands. He looked up and raised the baby, and it appeared to be covered in oozing, inky black liquid, much like that had covered Neil a couple weeks ago. It did not cry out, but it was alive. It had moved when he held it up. When its eyes opened, they were as black as my wife's, as black as the doctor's. In unison, they all breathed his name. Zadligo. I ripped my hand free of my wife's iron grip and stumbled upon the room, barreling into the nurses passing into the corridor just outside. When I stood up and looked back into the room, I could see the inky black tendrils seeming to extend from the doctor and my newborn across the floor to where I stood. I turned and ran down the hall to the elevator and slammed my finger into the buttons. When I looked back, the tendrils had come into the hallway, yet no one else seemed to notice it until slid over their feet and up their legs, at which point they abruptly stopped, turned and looked at me with those same obsidian eyes. I abandoned my effort to call the elevator and broke into a panicked run for the stairs. I ran down the 15 flights of stairs all the way to the lobby, tore ass out into the parking lot, hopped in my car and started driving. I didn't know where the fuck I was going. I just had to get the fuck away from there. I don't know if I'm going crazy. It certainly seems like it, but I just can't be around anyone I know anymore. They all have those same eyes and those same dead stares, even my child. Oh God, my baby. I still saw those eyes staring at me from the cars beside me. By some strange coincidence, the same biker from the previous Friday night at the bar pulled up beside me an hour away from the hospital and followed me for nearly 2 miles. He turned and stared at me, grinning. I couldn't see his eyes through the sunglasses this time, but I knew it was the same guy. His tattoos seemed to move on their own free will. The flaming skull on his right bicep began bleeding from its eye sockets. As soon as I could, I slammed on my brakes, allowing him to fly past me. As I swerved to my left and did a U-turn, I think I lost him. That was about an hour ago. I'm at a motel 3 hours out of town, the first place I found that has Wi-Fi, and I'm tired, and I'm shaking, and my hands itches where my wife's nails scratched me open. I honestly don't know what to do, or who I can turn to. This story will sound insane, and I'll probably be institutionalized, and I'm not sure that wouldn't be the best thing for me, but I just can't bear to look into those eyes anymore. Every time I see someone new, and they stare at me, I start to panic because I just know it's out there looking for me, whatever it is. When I lay down and start to drift asleep, I hear those words. He comes. Alright guys, time for story 2. Ickbarr Bigelsteine by... Who wrote this one? Where does it say? I believe it's Stefan D. Harris, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there it is, yeah. Stefan D. Harris, or Stephen D. Harris, or however you say it. But yes, Ickbarr Bigelsteine. This one is estimated to be about 6 minutes long, with a 9.2 rating out of 10. I have heard this one before on a different podcast, but when I was picking the stories, I saw it, so I was like, damn, I should read that one, because I actually do really like this story. So hopefully you guys do as well. Let's get right into it. When I was a small child, I was terrified of the dark. I still am, but back when I was around 6 years old, I couldn't go full night without crying out for one of my parents to search beneath my bed or in my closet for whatever monster I thought was waiting to eat me. Even with a night light, I would still see dark shapes moving around the corners of my room, or strange faces looking in on me from my bedroom window. My parents would do their best to console me, telling me that it was just a bad dream or a trick of the light. But in my young mind, I was positive that the second I fell asleep, the bad things would get me. Most of the time, I would just hide under the blankets until I became tired enough to stop worrying. But every now and then, I would become so panicked that I would run screaming into my parents' room, waking up my brother and sister in the process. After an ordeal like that, there would be no way anyone would be getting a full night's rest. Eventually, after one particularly traumatizing night, my parents had had enough. Unfortunately for them, they understand the futility in arguing with a 6-year-old and knew that they would be unable to convince me to rid myself of childish fears through reason and logic. They had to be clever. It was my mother's idea to stitch together my little bedtime friend. She collected a large assortment of random pieces of fabric in her sewing machine and created what I would later refer to as Mr. Ickbarr Bigelsteine, or Ick for short. Ick was a sock monster, as my mother called him. He was made to keep me safe while I was asleep by scaring away all the other monsters. He was pretty damn creepy, I had to admit. Honestly, looking back at it now, I'm still impressed that my mom could think of something so strange and disturbing. Ickbarr had the stitched-together look of a Frankenstein gremlin, with big white button eyes and floppy cat ears. His little arms and legs were made from a pair of my sister's black and white striped socks, and the half of his face was made from one of my brother's tall football socks. His head could have been described as bulbous, and for his mouth, my mom attached a piece of white fabric and sewed a zigzag pattern to shape a wide grin of sharp teeth. I loved him at once. From then on, Ick never left my side. So long as it was after dusk, of course. Ick didn't like the sun. It would get upset if I tried to bring him to school with me. But that was okay. I only needed him at night to keep away the boogeymen, which was what he was good at. So every night at bedtime, Ick would tell me where the monsters were hiding, and I would place him near the section of my room closest to the spookiness. If there was something in the closet, Ick would block the door. If there was a dark creature scratching at my window, Ick would be pressed up against the glass. If there was a big hairy beast under my bed, then under the bed he went. Sometimes the monsters weren't even in my room. Sometimes they would hide in my dreams, and Ickbarr would have to come with me into my nightmares. It was fun bringing Ick into my dream world, as he would spend hours fighting off ghouls and demons. The best part was, in my dreams, Ick could talk to me for real. "How much do you love me?" he would ask. "More than anything," I would always tell him. One night in a dream, after I'd lost my first tooth, Ick asked for a favor. "Can I have your tooth?" I asked him why. "To help me kill the bad things," he said. The next morning at breakfast, my mom asked me where my tooth went. From what she told me, the tooth fairy couldn't find it under my pillow. When I told her that I gave it to Ickbarr, she just shrugged and went back to feeding my little sister. From then on, every time I lost a tooth, I would give it to Ick. He would always thank me, of course, and tell me that he loved me. Eventually, though, I ran out of baby teeth, and I was beginning to get a little too old to still be playing with dolls. So Ick just sat there on my bookshelf collecting dust, slowly fading away from my attention. Over time, the nightmares, however, became worse than ever. So bad that they even began to follow me to the waking world, terrorizing every dark corner or rustle in the bushes. After one particularly bad night of biking home from a friend's house, where I swore a pack of rabid dogs were chasing me, I got home to find something strange waiting for me in my room. There, on my bed, standing fully upright in the soft glow of the moonlight from my window, was Ickbarr. At first, I just thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. They had been all evening. So I just tried to flick out the lights, another flick of the light switch, then another, and another, with no change to the darkness. It was then that I started to get nervous. I backed away slowly towards the door behind me, my eyes never leaving the shape of Ickbar's silhouette, my hands awkwardly outstretched behind, reaching for the doorknob. I was just about to get my ass out of there when I heard the door slam itself shut, locking me into blackness. In nothing but shadows and silence, I stood frozen in place, not even breathing. For how long I can't say, but after what felt like a lifetime of cold fear, I heard the shrill, familiar voice. You stopped feeding me, so why should I protect you? Protect me from what? Let me show you. I blinked once and everything changed. It wasn't my bedroom anymore. It was somewhere else. It wasn't hell, but the comparison wasn't far off. It was some sort of forest, a horrible nightmarish place where the partial embryonic abortions hung from the canopy, and the ground swarmed with carnivorous insects. A thick fog wafted through the air, and with it the stench of rotting meat, while chartreuse lightning flashed across the night sky. In the distance, I could hear the agonizing screams of something not quite human. My head throbbed like it was about to explode, the pain forcing out a river of tears. In my mind, I heard his voice again. This is what your reality would become without me. I felt earth-shaking footsteps approaching fast, if I'm the only one who can stop it. It was behind me now, huge and angry, hot breath across my back. Bring me what I need, and I will. I woke up before I could turn around. The following day, I raided my parents' closet for my brother's baby teeth, giving them all to Ickbarr. Almost immediately, the night terrors ceased, and I was more or less able to go about my life as normal. From time to time, I would have to sneak into my little sister's room and snatch what was meant for the tooth fairy, or strangle one of the neighborhood cats and pry out its sharp little incisors. Anything to ward off the visions. Anything from a shark tooth necklace to a cavity ridden by Cuspid. I also began to notice that Ick would move about my room whenever I left for any length of time, rearranging my stuff and hanging additional curtains. He was even beginning to look more lifelike. Somehow, in the right light, his teeth would glisten, and he was warm to the touch. As much as he creeped me out, I couldn't work up the courage to just destroy him, knowing perfectly well where that would leave me. So I just went on collecting teeth for Ick throughout all of high school and college. The older I got, the more things I would learn to fear, the more teeth Ick would need to keep me safe. I'm 22 years old now, with a decent job, my own apartment, and a set of dentures. It's been almost a month since Ick's last meal, and the horrors are starting to crowd around me once more. I took a detour through a parking garage after work tonight. Found a man fumbling with his car keys. His teeth were stained yellow from a lifetime of cigarettes and coffee. Even still, I had to use a hammer to get out the molars. When I got back to my apartment, he was waiting for me. On the ceiling, in the corner, 2 wide eyes and a mouth of razors. How much do you love me? He asks. More than anything, I reply, taking off my coat. More than anything in the world. Alright guys, story 3 time. This one is called Hoodie, or The Hooded Man. It has 2 names. The story is written by... where is it? The name's like not in the same place every time for these. Fucking who knows, it's by someone. Oh, it's written by an anonymous author. So that's not, it's just some random person wrote it, but it's one of the tops. It's one of the top ranked ones, I think, or it was one of the most famous ones or something. But yeah, it's called Hoodie, The Hooded Man by an anonymous author. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get right into it. This one is 4 to 5 minutes long, so hope you guys enjoy the story. Have you ever been influenced by clothing? I don't mean confidence by looks. Have you ever been given more control than ever by an item, or a truth, or just a favorite shirt? Have you ever been influenced in the worst way by showing the truth? The following is taken directly from journal entries. The entries were written by notorious but unknown killer. He is notorious in the means that everybody has seen his work. He is unknown because nobody knows he has done it. His origin is unusual. No troubles, no evil family, no magic or paranormal forces. His life was chosen by him and him alone. His identity is also unknown. He will be named from here on as the Hooded Man. April 3rd, 2004. It's been really cold around here. I don't have anything really to cover myself. All I have are my t-shirts and jeans, so today I decided to get a jacket. I was just in a local store, nothing special. It's a black hoodie with a white lining. I think it looks pretty cool. When I tried it on, the attendant said it suits me fine. I said thanks to be polite. Come on, courtesy is so hard to find. So I bought it. I haven't taken it off yet. Not only is it warm, but I can really see myself doing amazing things in it. When I look at the mirror, I smirk. I feel amazing. I can't really explain it, but I like it. I really like it. I feel the need to put my hood up. Something about the hood has a way of masking a person. Even though it shows their face, it hides something. Somewhere. It's really late right now. I've been feeling so great all day. Time flew around me. I'll have to explain more tomorrow. April 10th. I've had hell of a week. I felt so great. I walked the halls like a big shot. I'm sure I looked smug. That's why Jack challenged me. He was so angry. Who never knew ignoring an insult was more insulting than responding with shrewd comments about someone's family. He antagonized me. He asked for it. He threw a hard punch, and I stood. It stung harder than before when I actually argued with him. I felt so cool all week. My confidence kept me up. I punched him hard in the stomach, and I lifted him up with an uppercut. It felt so good. It really did. Parents calling. April 14th. Jack still isn't out of the hospital. They said he's in a lot of pain. He spit out a lot of blood. His parents told me over the phone. I reflected on it, on how great it felt when my fist connected, how his cracked scream sounded. That's good to hear, I said blankly. I don't care about Jack. I smiled at his pain. I kept staring. I keep staring at my mirror. I'm always wearing my favorite hoodie. It feels so empowering. My friends would laugh at what I say. They would compare me to Spider-Man in his black suit. Spider-Man threw his power away. I don't plan on doing anything with my source of confidence. April 22nd. Jack has gone to a better place. Those words rang through my ears. He's dead. He lost too much blood. His father told me the day I visited that he was losing blood due to a personal health condition. But the way his mother looked at me and told me the real story, I killed him. I still remember the satisfaction of hitting him. I never wanted to kill him. I need to think about what I've done, right? That'll fix my feelings. But what is there to think about? Regret is a foolish emotion. I don't need regret. April 24th. Dad has been avoiding me lately, and Mom just tells me she loves me. They both want me to feel endless guilt, but I won't. Or rather, I can't. I can't fake it for the public, but the truth is, I'm not sorry. Spider-Man's story is starting to make me think more. But why should a cursed or possessed hoodie land in my possession? Everybody who knew Jack glares at me. Everybody who I would have talked to has transferred themselves out of my class or went to a different school. Teachers don't look at me much or get onto me if I'm breaking any rule. Today I threw a pencil at my history teacher. It hit his shoulder. He just froze for a second and continued what he was doing. Everyone either hates me and probably wants me dead, or they fear me. My writing is the only comfort I have, and I can be at peace and let myself go. April 25th. They provoked me. They threatened me. I had no choice. They would have killed me. My hood protected my face. The knife naturally moved from Rob's hand to mine. I didn't mean to. April 30th. 5 days. 5 days being interrogated and sleeping in a cell. They decided I was only defending myself. I can hear Mom and Dad talking. They want me gone. They are both scared. I was an idiot to think that this jacket of mine was possessing me or changing my personality. It's just a really cool jacket. I love how it looks. I feel like such a badass. I remember how I put the hood up. I put it up when Jack challenged me. I put it up when those guys tried to kill me. I feel no remorse. I feel indifferent. I am in control. I have finally come to realize insanity. I wanted to kill them. All of them. I needed only a push and the confidence to fight. I got it. Mom and Dad are irritating me. They all irritated me. Alrighty, guys, that was episode 28 of the Babblmouth podcast. Hopefully, you guys did enjoy those stories. If you guys do want to see more Creepypasta stories from your boy, ImNexusss with 3 S's, make sure you guys follow the podcast. We will have another one of these within a little bit of time. I don't know exactly when, but within these next bunch of episodes, you will get another one of these. So hope you guys enjoy. 3 more stories coming very soon. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week for a new episode with the boys. Anyway, boys and girls, make sure you drop 5 stars on Spotify, rate the podcast wherever, share it with your friends and family. And I'll see you guys later, all right? Have a good night, everyone.